Hello humanoids, welcome to Halfling Hobbies. I'm Halfling Hannah, and there is one great truth to telling a really good story, and that's this, that yes, your readers will root for the hero, but it's the villain that makes the story. You see, villains, they're the ones who create the conflict. They're the ones who threaten the greater good. They give the heroes something to overcome. They challenge them and they create drama, making a really good story. In your D&D campaign, your players are the heroes. We root for them, we cheer for them, we love them, but you are the villain. You make the story, and your players should love to hate you. If you're not quite sure how to make this happen, well, today I have 5 ways to roleplay your villains to make sure your players hate you in a good way. Here we go. Alright humanoids, before we get into my 5 ways that I love to roleplay villains, I need to know, what is the most hated villain that you have ever created or played? And what made them so hated by your players? Please leave that down in the comments below. You know that I like to make these videos as useful as possible for DMs, especially new DMs, so help us out with how you succeeded in making a villain that was truly hated. Alright, let's get into my 5 ways to roleplay villains. Number 1 is actually a little bit of background. Number 1 is you need to know your players. You need to know what makes them tick, what they're afraid of, what their backstories are. Even if you have players that hate to make backstories, because they do exist, I have several of them, you either end up in this kind of dilemma. You have players that make really awesome and intricate backstories, or you have players that hate to make backstories at all. If you have players like that, you still need to encourage them to think about their character's backstory, especially if you want to be able to use these things, because here's the whole point of it, is it is all torture fuel. That's what I like to call it. You're going to use these things later on to torture your players, so you need to have this information. Here are the questions that I like to ask to make sure I have enough torture fuel to get my players to really hate my villain. Number 1, what are you afraid of? This can be something simple or a very deep-seated fear. Either way is fine. You can use all of it. You can use these to put your players in situations that they are afraid of, or to pull on those fears to manipulate them in some way. So number 1, what is your PC afraid of? Number 2, what in your history are you ashamed of, or do you keep a secret? Secrets are amazing torture fuel because you can hint at them. If it's something really bad your players don't want anyone to know, you can throw in some subtle hints, or you can straight up ruin them with it. But whatever it is, there needs to be some kind of secret, some kind of shame that they're trying to keep hidden. The next one, number 3, is why did you become an adventurer? This hints at the deeper goals, the things that the player really wants, because a good villain should know what their enemy wants and tempt them with it. And then the final one, number 4, who is your character closest to? There's nothing like bringing in a nice hostage that your players love and adore, and maybe or maybe not murdering them in front of them. You never know. You know, I really honestly thought about making the title of this video just how to torture your players, but I thought maybe that was too dark, and then I just said kill the person that they love the most, so I really probably should have just titled it that. Anyway, moving on to number 2. Number 2, make it personal. We fall into this trap as DMs of making our villain, you know, responsible for like ending the world, these big events. The problem is, rarely do your players really care about your world or saving your world. What they really care about is themselves and the story that they have created around themselves. So if you really want your players to hate your villain, you need to make it personal. Again, this is where that torture fuel comes in. Is there some major event in your player's life that you can then tie to your villain and make your villain responsible for those things in some way? That is an excellent way to get your players to absolutely hate you and vow to destroy you. Another good way of doing this is to specifically mock your PC's weaknesses. Put them in situations that make them feel weak or make them feel like they can't do anything, like watching the destruction of their village from a hilltop, knowing that the villain did it, knowing that there's nothing they can do about it. So, whenever possible, make it personal. Number 3, interact often. The number one mistake that new DMs make when they're making a villain is that they hold off to reveal them at the end. This is a terrible idea, because if you have never interacted with this person until the very end, you don't really care. Like, you reveal that they're the villain and your players go, okay, cool, I don't know who you are, but I'm gonna kill you now. And it's just not as dramatic as it could be. Instead, interact with the players often. This could be in a disguise, like Strahd does a lot throughout Curse of Strahd. You can actually be in a disguise and go and interact with them. Or a better way that I like to do it is interact with them in situations that they have no power. So, an example of this would be if the villain shows up at an event where you cannot do any form of violence. It's frowned upon. You'll get in big trouble if you try and do something to them. Or they appear in a crowd of a whole bunch of innocent people, knowing that the PCs can't do anything to them without risking the lives of all of these other people. This is a great way for the villain to kind of showcase their power, to make them, to make your PCs feel weak and vulnerable and like they can't do anything to stop him. And it's a great way to make your PCs really hate your villain. Interact with them often, even in dreams, visions, things like that, which is our next one, number 4. If you can, use dreams, visions, or perhaps even just messengers or messages. So this one is specific to Curse of Strahd and other domains of dread where the villain really has a lot of control over their area. They can actually force the players to dream or have nightmares. This is an excellent way to interact with your characters more without necessarily having to set up a whole scene where they meet physically the actual villain. Nightmares are an excellent way. If there's something in the past that your player holds on to that they're ashamed of, maybe their village got slaughtered and there's nothing they could do about it, make them relive that event over and over in their nightmares, where they're maybe tied up or they're watching someone that they love die and they know that there's nothing they can do about it. That is an excellent way to get in your players' heads and make them hate your villain for doing it. Another way is good dreams. What about dreams of power that they could have if they just joined the villain's side? This can also happen through telekinesis. If you have a magic using villain, they can send messages to different members of the party, perhaps plant seeds of doubt about the other party members and their loyalty, or promise them great things, exactly what they want in their backstory and in their goals. Perhaps they can promise that to them if they just join their side. This is an excellent way to cause paranoia, get in your player's head, and make them hate your villain. And then finally, number 5 is create moral dilemmas. This is super underrated, but this is a classic villain move. Think the Joker and Batman, where Batman has a choice. You've got this barrage of people that you can save, or this one person that you love. This is an impossible choice. No matter what you do, you're wrong, because either you sacrifice a whole bunch of people for your own selfish desires, or you lose the person that you love. that is an impossible choice. This is also excellent for villains in D&D to do, because if you have any kind of paladins, clerics, anything like that, where they have a vow or an oath, put them in a situation where they have to choose the lesser of two evils, and it will mess with a lawful good character. Is it better to do this one thing or to stick to your vow, even though something bad is going to happen if you do? These moral dilemmas, the questioning, these gray areas and impossible choices are what really make your players hate a villain. These are my 5 ways that I roleplay villains to make sure that my players love to hate them. Make sure to leave your suggestions down in the comments below, and I hope that this gives your game advantage. Halfling Hannah here, signing out.